This is Heliox, where evidence meets empathy. Independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter. Breathe easy. We go deep and lightly surface the big ideas. Have you ever, been walking down the street totally lost in your own world, and you watch a complete stranger just violently stub their toe against the concrete curb?
Oh, yeah. Like a real full-speed collision.
Exactly. I mean, a brutal impact. And what happens to you in that exact fraction of a second?
I feel it.
Right. Your own stomach drops, your shoulders tense up, you physically wince, and you might even let out that little, hiss of air through your teeth.
Yep, the sympathetic wince.
It's almost as if the physical impact, the sheer kinetic violence of that moment, somehow reverberated across the sidewalk and just struck your own body.
It really does feel that way.
Or, think about watching one of those skateboarding fail videos.
Those are the worst.
They are. A kid goes flying toward a metal handrail, and honestly, before they even make contact, your entire nervous system recoils.
You're bracing for impact.
Yeah. Why does that happen? Why do you feel this visceral phantom echo of someone else's physical pain when your own body is perfectly safe, just sitting on a couch miles away?
It's a profound phenomenon, really. And it gets right to the core of an assumption that most of us make every single day.
Which is what?
Well, we walk through life assuming that the boundary of who we are, our literal self, ends abruptly at our skin.
Right. I am me and you are you.
Exactly. We treat the brain like an isolated computer sitting in this dark, bony vault. It's a scully eye, right?
Yeah.
Just sort of passively receiving data from the outside world and printing out this totally objective report of reality.
Like a dash cam or something.
Yeah, like a dash cam. But when you wince at a stranger's stubbed toe, your brain is actually revealing its true nature. It is not an objective reporter at all.
No.
No, it is a highly fluid, predictive, and honestly surprisingly gullible reality engine.
Okay, let's unpack this, because framing the brain not as a static, rigid computer, but as a dynamic, gullible reality engine, that changes everything about how we understand human perception.
It totally shifts the paradigm.
Right. Because if my brain is just projecting a reality based on what it thinks is happening, how far can that projection go?
Pretty far, as it turns out.
Well, today, for our deep dive into the hidden mechanics of embodiment, we are going to explore exactly that. We're looking at how your brain draws the boundary of what is you, how easily that boundary can be hacked by technology, and how you can actually use those exact same biological rules to rewire your own mental health.
It's a fascinating journey, really. And to understand how dynamic this engine is, we have to look closely at that toe-stubbing reaction.
The sympathetic wince.
Right. In neuroscience, there's this long-standing mystery surrounding something called vicarious activation.
Vicarious activation.
Yeah, that's the clinical term for why seeing someone else being touched or hurt activates your own internal sense of touch.
Okay.
For decades, the dominant theory was that our sensory systems were completely segregated into distinct departments.
Right, like a corporate office building or something?
Exactly like that.
You have the visual department handling the eyes on the top floor, the somatosensory department handling physical touch down the hall, and the motor department handling movement somewhere else. And they never interact.
That was the assumption. And we know that these departments map out their territories very specifically.
What do you mean by map out?
Well, in neuroscience, we talk a lot about topographical mapping. Think of how a cartographer maps a city.
Okay.
The map corresponds to the physical layout of the streets. The brain does this with your senses. In your primary visual cortex, which sits right at the back of your head and is often called V1, there is a retinotopic map.
Retinotopic, so it's mapping the retina.
It's mapping the visual field based on the retina, yes. Neighboring regions of brain tissue in V1 are tuned to process neighboring locations in your actual visual field.
I think I need an example for that one.
Sure. If you look at two apples sitting right next to each other on a table,
Okay, 2 apples.
the literal neurons firing in your visual cortex to process those apples are physically right next to each other in your brain.
Oh, wow. So the visual cortex has a literal spatial map of the world I'm looking at.
Exactly. It mimics the geometry of the outside world.
That's incredible. So I assume the touch department operates the same way.
It does, yeah. Up in the parietal lobe near the top of your head, you have the primary somatosensory cortex, or S1. This contains a somatotopic map.
Somatotopic.
Right. Neighboring locations in this brain tissue map to neighboring parts of your physical body. The neurons that process a physical tap on your wrist sit directly adjacent to the neurons that process a tap on your hand.
Oh, wait. I remember seeing drawings of this in a psychology class years ago. The homunculus, right?
Yes, the homunculus.
That weird, distorted little man where the hands and the lips are massive.
That's the one. And they're massive because those areas of our body have way more sensory receptors, so they take up more real estate on the brain map.
Right, okay. So under the classical view, you have your visual map in the back of the head and your touch map up top. Separate territories.
Separate territories. But a recent groundbreaking study completely shatters this idea of segregation.
Really? How so?
Well, researchers wanted to know if these networks were actually talking to each other behind the scenes. So they used a highly advanced technique called connective field modeling.
Connective field modeling. That sounds like something, I don't know, an electrical engineer would use to trace wiring in a skyscraper.
It really does.
How does that actually work in a living human brain?
It is incredibly sophisticated. Rather than just looking at which part of the brain lights up when you poke someone, connective field modeling looks at the spontaneous fluctuations in brain activity.
Like when you're just sitting there.
Exactly. They track fMRI, Bull-D signals, which measure blood oxygen levels while the brain is just resting, or while the person is watching natural everyday videos.
Okay, so they're just watching blood flow while someone watches a movie.
Right. And then algorithms map how the activity in one small patch of brain tissue predicts the activity in another patch over time.
Oh, so they're looking for correlations.
Yes. It's not just drawing a static wire. It's inferring the underlying network by watching the actual traffic patterns of neural communication.
So they are tracking the flow of traffic to see which departments are secretly collaborating.
Exactly.
And what did they find when they mapped it out?
They found that the maps are completely entangled.
Entangled how?
Well, the most shocking discovery was within the dorsolateral visual cortex. This is a region traditionally associated with very high-level visual processing.
Like identifying objects and stuff?
Yeah, identifying objects, understanding complex scenes. The researchers found that this visual region actually contains multiple somatotopic maps.
Wait.
Yeah.
I need to pause here to make sure I'm visualizing this correctly. You're saying the part of my brain that is purely responsible for seeing the world
Right.
has a map of my physical skin and limbs secretly running in the background.
It's not even in the background. Your visual system is actively utilizing touch-related computations to make sense of what it sees.
That is wild.
The computational machinery of physical touch is literally woven into the visual system.
But hang on. If my visual cortex has a topographical map of my foot, why don't I physically feel a tingling in my toes every time I look down at the floor?
That's a great question.
Right, because shouldn't looking at my foot trigger a tactile sensation if the maps are sharing the exact same space?
Well, that is the crucial distinction between subthreshold activation and conscious perception.
Subthreshold, meaning it doesn't quite reach the level of me noticing it.
Exactly. When you look at your foot, the visual cortex uses its internal touch map to predict and contextualize what a foot is and how it might interact with the environment.
Okay.
It primes the somatosensory cortex, but usually not enough to cross the threshold into a conscious physical sensation. It's a predictive simulation running quietly.
A quiet simulation.
Right. But it explains why the boundaries blur so easily when you watch that skateboarder crash. The visual input of the crash is so violent that it violently spikes the activity in those shared maps, bleeding over the threshold and causing that phantom wince.
Because the brain is pulling from the exact same database to process sight and touch.
You got it.
That is fascinating. And the study goes even deeper into how specific this alignment is, right? They mapped out something called a toe-to-tongue axis.
Yes. The alignment isn't random at all. The researchers found that the spatial layout of the visual field perfectly mirrors the physical layout of the body.
How does that work?
Well, if a specific cluster of neurons in this visual touch network is tuned to process sensations in your physical foot,
Okay.
that exact same cluster is tuned to process the lower part of your visual field.
Oh, because ecologically, throughout millions of years of evolution, our feet have always existed at the bottom of our field of view.
Precisely. Our brains evolved to expect feet to be down there.
That makes so much sense.
And it extends beyond just raw space into complex semantic categories too. They looked closely at two areas: the extrasutrate body area, the EBA, and the fusiform body area, the FBA.
What do those do?
These are specific neural neighborhoods known for lighting up when we look at human bodies.
Okay, so body recognition.
Right. The connective field modeling showed that your sensitivity to feeling a physical touch on your arm directly predicts your visual sensitivity to seeing an arm,
Regardless of where it is.
regardless of where that arm is in your field of view.
So my ability to visually recognize an arm on a movie screen is fundamentally reliant on my brain's understanding of what it feels like to have my own arm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We can never truly perceive the world independent of our physical bodies. Over a century ago, the pioneering psychologist William James argued that mental content can never be purely disembodied.
And they just proved him right.
They found the hard neurological proof we are constantly simulating the physical reality of what we see.
Which, I mean, raises a massive, slightly terrifying question for me. If vision and touch are this deeply entangled, if they rely on each other to agree on what reality is,
Yeah.
what happens if we intentionally feed the brain conflicting data? Like, if we put corrupt files into that shared database, can we break the map?
We absolutely can.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And to see how we look to a fascinating experiment using immersive virtual reality. Researchers wanted to know how far they could push this reality engine.
Okay, I love where this is going.
They wanted to see if they could trick the brain into physically altering its motor commands based on an impossible, magical perception of reality.
I was blown away by the methodology of this experiment. It's known as the stone arm illusion, right?
That's the one.
So they take healthy volunteers, put them in high-end VR headsets, and give them a first-person view of an avatar.
Right?
They look down, and where their real arm is, they see a digital arm. But then the researchers initiate this slow visual transformation.
It's very cinematic.
It is.
Hmm.
The digital skin of the avatar's arm gradually turns gray, the texture hardens, and it visually transforms into solid rock.
But, as we just learned from the entanglement research, visual information alone isn't always enough to completely hijack the brain's internal map.
Right. If I just watch a movie of a stone arm, I don't suddenly feel like my arm is made of stone.
Exactly. The brain needs multisensory integration to fully commit to a new reality.
So they had to add touch and sound.
They added perfectly synchronous, tactile, and auditory feedback. While the participant watched their virtual arm turn to stone in the headset, they saw a virtual hammer repeatedly striking the stone.
Ouch.
Right. And simultaneously, in the physical world, a researcher was actually tapping the participant's real arm with a physical object.
And the audio was piped in too. Through the headphones, they heard the sharp, like, clink, clink, clink of a hammer hitting rock, perfectly timed with the visual strike and the physical tap.
This is the critical mechanism. Multisensory congruency.
Multi-sensory congruency.
Sight, touch, and sound were aggressively telling the brain a unified story.
They were all aligned.
Yes. When the brain receives perfectly timed, synchronous inputs from multiple sensory streams, it is computationally forced to bind them together into a single event.
So the brain is just doing the math.
Exactly. It assumes, well, the eyes see a hammer hitting stone, the ears hear a hammer hitting stone, and the skin feels the impact.
Therefore, the arm must be made of stone.
Exactly. The logic is flawless, biologically speaking.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because, I mean, you could argue, okay, the participants knew they were in an experiment.
Sure.
They probably just filled out a questionnaire saying, sure, my arm feels heavy, to just please the researchers,
I
right?
think so.
But this wasn't just subjective role play. The brain actually altered its physiological state.
It did. The researchers didn't just rely on questionnaires. They wanted to see if the brain was preparing to move a physical stone arm.
How do you even measure that?
To measure this, they used something called transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS.
Okay, I have to stop you there because shooting magnets into someone's brain sounds incredibly intense.
It sounds a bit sci-fi, I know.
What exactly is a TMS machine doing in this context?
It's actually a very established neurological tool. A researcher holds a magnetic coil over a specific area of the participant's skull.
Oh, okay.
In this case, directly over the primary motor cortex. That's the part of the brain that sends movement commands to the arm.
Got it.
The coil delivers a very brief, highly focused magnetic pulse. This pulse passes right through the skull and induces a tiny electrical current in the brain tissue below.
It essentially jump-starts the neurons in the motor cortex.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
Yes, it jump-starts them. When those neurons are jump-started, they send a signal down the spinal cord and into the arm, causing the muscles to involuntarily twitch.
Just a little spasm.
Right. And we can measure the strength of that twitch in the muscle using electrodes.
Okay, so a bigger twitch means what?
This measurement tells us the motor cortical excitability. If the motor cortex is highly excitable, it means it is primed, revved up, and ready to send strong signals.
So it's like a car engine revving high.
Yeah, exactly. If it is less excitable, the resulting twitch will be much smaller.
So when the participants were under the illusion that their arm was made of solid rock, what did the TMS reveal?
It revealed that motor cortical excitability significantly increased.
Wow.
The subjectively reported strength of the illusion, meaning how much the person genuinely felt they had a stone arm, directly correlated with how much extra juice the brain was sending to the muscles.
The brain was literally preloading the physical effort required to lift a boulder.
Yes.
Because a stone arm is incredibly heavy. The reality engine calculated the physics of stone and adjusted the hardware accordingly.
It did. And it translated into real-world behavior, too.
Really?
Yeah. When the researchers asked the participants to perform a simple reaching task, the individuals experiencing the stone arm illusion initiated their movements significantly faster than the control group.
Why faster?
They were physically compensating for the embodied characteristics of their avatar. They were bracing for weight that didn't exist, so they fired off the movement with way more force.
It really highlights the brain's sheer gullibility.
It's remarkably trusting of its senses.
It doesn't care about logic or biology. It doesn't step back and say, wait, human biology dictates that skin cannot transmutate into granite.
No, not at all.
It only cares about the immediate sensory correlation.
It is a purely predictive machine optimizing for survival based on incoming data. If the congruent data says you are stone, the most efficient survival strategy is to adjust your motor cortex to move stone.
And we saw this exact same mechanism applied in a completely different way in another source we reviewed, a brief but honestly incredible report detailing a study where 25 people were trained to fly in VR using virtual wings.
I love this study. It perfectly complements the stone arm data, but it pushes it into novel anatomy.
Totally novel. I mean, we don't have wings.
Right. The participants wore VR headsets and had motion trackers attached to their bodies. Their physical movements controlled the flapping of these large digital wings extending from their avatar's back.
And the human genome obviously does not contain instructions for mapping wings. We don't have a dormant wing department in the motor cortex just waiting to be unlocked.
We definitely do not.
Yet, the report noted that after extensive flight training, the participants' brains started treating the virtual wings as if they were real physical extensions of their own bodies.
The boundary of the self simply extended outward to encompass the digital feathers.
That is wild.
It demonstrates that our sense of embodiment isn't fixed at birth. It's a dynamic hypothesis that the brain continuously updates.
So give it congruent feedback about wings, it embodies wings. Give it congruent feedback about stone, it embodies stone.
Exactly.
So if the brain is this eager to adopt fake anatomy as long as the sensory timing is right,
Yeah.
can we weaponize that gullibility? Like if the brain buys a virtual stone arm, can it buy a robotic arm after a stroke? Can we use this mechanism to heal people who have lost real motor function?
This is exactly where the cutting edge of neurorehabilitation is heading. And it brings us to a really fascinating study looking at the intersection of virtual reality, embodiment, and brain-computer interfaces.
Okay, BCIs. Let's lay the groundwork for the listener here, because this isn't complex stuff.
Sure.
A brain-computer interface is a system that allows a person to control an external device, like moving a cursor on a screen or articulating a robotic prosthetic using only their brain activity. No physical movement required.
Right.
You wear an EEG cap that reads your brain waves, and the computer translates those waves into action.
That's a great summary. And one of the most common ways we train patients to use BCIs is through something called motor imagery.
Motor imagery, just imagining movement.
Exactly. We ask the patient to vividly mentally rehearse a movement. Imagine opening and closing your hand, feeling the muscles tense, visualizing the fingers moving, but keeping your physical hand completely still.
And when someone does that, it changes the electrical rhythm of their brain.
Yes, it does.
Specifically, this study talks about alpha and beta frequency bands. What are those mechanically? Are they like, I don't know, different gears in a car?
That's a decent analogy. Your brain is a massive network of billions of neurons firing electrical impulses, right?
Right.
When you are resting, not doing much, large groups of neurons in the motor cortex tend to fire together in a synchronized rhythm. It's like a stadium full of people all doing the wave together.
Oh, I like that visual.
This synchronized rhythmic firing creates prominent, slow oscillations that we can measure on an EEG. These are the alpha and beta bands. They basically represent a state of idling.
So synchronization actually means the brain is taking a break.
Yes.
What happens when I suddenly decide to mentally rehearse opening my hand?
The stadium wave stops.
The wave stops.
Suddenly, all those neurons have specific individual jobs to do. They start firing out of sync with one another as they handle the complex computations of planning a movement.
Because they're all doing their own distinct task now.
Exactly. And because they are no longer firing together in a massive rhythm, the overall power of those alpha and beta bands drops significantly on the EEG monitor.
And that drop is called event-related desynchronization, or ERD.
Exactly, event-related desynchronization. The stronger the ERD, meaning the bigger the drop in those idling frequencies, the more intensely the brain is engaging in the motor imagery.
And the clearer the signal is for the brain-computer interface to pick up.
You got it. That's the signal the computer translates into action.
Okay, so the mechanics are totally clear. We want a strong ERD signal to make the robotic arm work. And the research team hypothesized that they could use VR to hack this process.
They did.
They thought if they use VR to give a patient a powerful, undeniable feeling of embodiment over a virtual avatar before they do their motor imagery training, it should prime the brain to produce massive ERD signals.
It was a very logical hypothesis. Based on everything we've discussed about the stone arm, priming the brain with multisensory congruency should theoretically rev up the motor cortex.
So how did they test it?
They divided participants into two groups. The experimental group received full embodiment priming.
What did that look like?
For 5 minutes, they inhabited a first-person VR avatar. Their physical movements perfectly matched the avatar's movements. The researchers even used the virtual hand illusion.
I've heard of that. That's with the brush, right?
Yes. They took a physical brush and stroked the participant's real hand, while the participant watched a virtual brush stroke their avatar's hand in perfect synchrony.
The ultimate multisensory buy-in.
Exactly.
What about the control group?
The control group received purposefully mismatched, broken feedback. They view their avatar from a third-person out-of-body perspective.
Oh, weird.
Right, and their physical movements did not sync with the avatar. When the virtual hand was brushed on screen, their real physical hand felt nothing.
So the researchers actively sabotaged the reality engine for this group.
Exactly.
So one group feels completely unified with the digital body, and the other group feels totally disconnected. Then the VR headsets come off, the EEG caps go on, and both groups do the motor imagery task imagining opening and closing their hands.
Yes.
I assumed the group that was perfectly primed just blew the control group out of the water.
This is where the study takes a hard counterintuitive turn.
Oh.
When they looked at the subjective questionnaires, the priming worked flawlessly. The experimental group reported a massive sense of embodiment. They truly felt ownership over the avatar.
Okay, so the illusion worked.
It worked subjectively.
Yeah.
But when they analyzed the actual EEG data, the ERD signals during the motor imagery task, there was no significant difference between the two groups.
Wait.
Yeah.
The brain fully bought the illusion, but it didn't translate into stronger physiological signals during the actual training?
Correct.
Why would the reality engine accept the stone arm but fail to boost the BCI?
Because of when the feedback occurred. The researchers concluded that prior priming, like warming up the brain in VR and then taking the headset off to do the task, doesn't carry over.
Oh, I see.
To drive neurophysiological changes, the brain requires real-time, closed-loop feedback during the task.
Ah. The stone arm participants were receiving the visual and tactile feedback simultaneously while the TMS was measuring their excitability.
Exactly.
The BCI participants did the VR, stopped, and then did the imagery.
Precisely. If you want the brain to alter its predictive models, it needs the data stream to be active while it's doing the work.
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
But this raises an important question, something the researchers noticed when they looked closer at the data.
What was that?
They found immense intersubject variability.
Meaning different brains reacted in wildly different ways to the exact same VR setup?
Yes. They looked at lateralization, how brain activity shifts between the left and right hemispheres. In the fully embodied group, the variance was massive.
Like some people just didn't buy it.
Right. Some individuals were incredibly susceptible to the illusion, fully integrating the virtual body, and they performed well. But others in that same group were entirely resistant.
Despite the perfect multisensory congruency.
Despite the perfect timing, their reality engine simply rejected the avatar, and their subsequent BCI performance was poor.
So we can't just plug everyone into the matrix and expect the exact same results. The brain's integration of reality is highly individualized.
Technology can provide the perfect stimulus, the perfect visual tactile overlap, but the individual's unique neural architecture ultimately acts as the gatekeeper.
That's fascinating.
It suggests that in the future of neurorehabilitation, we can't just prescribe VR across the board. We will need to screen patients to map their individual susceptibility to embodiment illusions before we design their therapy.
It's a really good reminder that while the brain is gullible, it still has its own internal security protocols.
Exactly.
But, here is the truly empowering part of all this. We don't live in VR headsets, at least not yet.
Not quite yet.
And we don't need $1 million BCI lab to utilize this reality engine hacking. This constant, dynamic redrawing of our mental maps is happening every single time we interact with the physical world.
It is.
It's called neuroplasticity. And it brings us to a fantastic breakdown published by a mental health resource we reviewed.
Neuroplasticity is a buzzword that has honestly lost a bit of its meaning in pop science, but it is fundamentally the exact biological process we've been unpacking today.
Right.
It is the brain's mechanical capacity to forge new neural pathways, to prune old ones, and to reorganize its physical structure based on incoming data.
Now, I've heard the classic phrase a million times, neurons that fire together wire together.
We all have, yeah.
But that always sounded a bit like a self-help slogan to me. What is the actual biological mechanism happening in the brain when we say pathways are wiring together?
It's a process called long-term potentiation, or LTP.
Long-term potentiation.
Right. When two neurons communicate repeatedly, the synapse, the tiny gap between them, physically changes.
Physically changes, like it shapeshifts.
In a way. The receiving neuron builds more receptor sites on its dendrites, making it more sensitive to the chemical messengers released by the first neuron.
Oh, so it's adding more mailboxes to receive more mail.
That's a great way to think of it. Over time, repeated firing actually triggers genetic changes within the cells to grow new dendritic spines, physically strengthening the structural connection.
So it's not just a software update, it's the hardware upgrading itself.
Exactly.
The brain is literally building wider bridges between cells that talk to each other a lot, making future communication faster and taking less effort.
You've got it. And for a long time, the dogma in medicine was that this hardware was fixed by early adulthood. We thought you were just stuck with the brain you had.
But that's not true.
No. We now know that neurogenesis, the birth of new neurons and synaptic pruning, continue throughout our entire lifespan.
And this brings us to anxiety.
It does.
Because when you read the breakdown through the lens of everything we've just learned about embodiment and prediction, you realize that chronic anxiety is, at its core, a neuroplasticity problem.
It really is.
It is the reality engine learning a lesson a little too well.
That is a perfect framing. Anxiety often results from the brain's default settings around certain triggers becoming hypersensitized.
Right.
The clinical literature focuses heavily on the amygdala, which is a small almond-shaped structure deep in the temporal lobe. It acts as the brain's threat detection center. The fire alarm, basically.
But the amygdala is a blunt instrument. It operates entirely on pattern recognition, not logic, right?
Completely.
Let's say you have a terrifying panic attack on an airplane. Your heart is racing, you feel trapped, you literally feel like you might die. How does the reality engine process that event?
Well, the amygdala logs every single sensory detail of that environment.
Every detail.
Yeah. The specific hum of the jet engines, the smell of the recycled cabin air, the physical sensation of the seatbelt pressing against your waist, and it binds all of those sensory inputs to a state of mortal terror.
Oh, wow.
Through long-term potentiation, it builds this massive, highly efficient neural superhighway connecting airplane environment to fight-or-flight response.
So 5 years later, you step onto a completely safe, routine flight to visit family. The second you smell the cabin air and hear the engines, that superhighway lights up.
The amygdala sounds the alarm immediately. It is running an outdated, hypervigilant script based on past data. The brain's reality engine is predicting danger.
And this is where it all connects. The anxious person on that airplane is experiencing the exact same biological mechanism as the person in the VR headset with the stone arm.
They absolutely are.
The brain is receiving sensory cues, predicting an outcome based on its maps, and altering the physical body to prepare for it.
Right.
The VR participant braced for heavy stone. The airline passenger braces for a life or death struggle, triggering a cascade of adrenaline, a racing heart, and shallow breathing.
It's the same system at work.
The brain fully believes the simulation of danger, regardless of objective reality.
You are embodying the state of panic because your sensory maps are perfectly aligned to predict disaster.
That is so wild to think about.
But because neuroplasticity is a two-way street, you can use these exact same mechanics to rewrite the map.
You can undo it.
You can.
Yeah.
You can weaken the old pathways, a process called synaptic depression, and forge new, resilient ones.
The mental health resource we looked at offers highly actionable, everyday tools for doing this. But what's fascinating is looking at why these tools work on a mechanistic level.
Yeah, the mechanics are key.
The first one they suggest is aerobic exercise. And they don't just mean it helps you blow off steam.
No, the biology here is remarkable. They cite neuroscientists who explain that aerobic exercise is literally fertilizing the brain.
Fertilizing it.
Yeah. When you engage in sustained cardiovascular exercise, your body produces a protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF.
BDNF. I've heard this described as miracle grow for the brain.
That's a very accurate colloquialism, honestly. BDNF floods the brain, particularly targeting the hippocampus, which is deeply involved in memory and regulating the amygdala.
Okay, so it targets the areas we need to fix.
Right. It promotes the survival of existing neurons and encourages the growth and differentiation of new neurons and synapses.
So exercise literally builds the physical infrastructure you need to construct new, healthier pathways and calm the hyperactive threat detection system.
It gives you the raw materials to remodel.
That is incredible. So exercise gives you the raw materials. The second tool is meditation.
Right.
Now, meditation can sound a bit esoteric to some, but the functional changes in the brain are super well documented. What is happening physically when someone sits and observes their anxious thoughts?
We are looking at the downregulation of the default mode network, or DMN.
The DMN.
The DMN is a network of interacting brain regions that is highly active when we are lost in internal thought, ruminating on the past or worrying about the future.
Which is pretty much the hallmark of anxiety.
Exactly. Meditation, particularly mindfulness practices, actively quiets the DMN, but more importantly, when you observe an anxious thought without reacting to it with panic, you are deliberately choosing not to send electrical signals down that old superhighway pathway.
You are breaking the fire together, wire together cycle. By not engaging the panic response, the brain initiates synaptic pruning. It realizes, hey, we aren't using this mortal terror pathway when we think about airplanes anymore. Let's dismantle some of these receptor sites to save energy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are structurally dismantling the anxiety reflex.
Wow.
And this leads directly into the practice of learning new skills and changing internal scripts. Every time you learn a new skill, whether it's juggling, playing a new instrument, or speaking a new language, you are forcing the brain to remain plastic.
You are keeping the machinery of neurogenesis well-oiled.
Exactly right.
And you apply that plasticity to reality testing. This is my favorite concept from the article. It's basically the mental equivalent of the BCI closed-loop feedback we talked about earlier.
Yes, reality testing is crucial. When the amygdala sounds the alarm and the reality engine projects impending doom, you have to consciously intervene and provide the brain with real-time objective data.
You have to talk back to it.
You do. You ask yourself, are my thoughts based on the objective physical reality of this room, or are they just a perception generated by my maps?
So you look out the airplane window, the engines are fine, the flight attendants are pouring coffee. You provide the brain with congruent, safe sensory feedback.
Right.
Just like the brain-computer interface needed real-time feedback to drive that desynchronization, your amygdala needs real-time safety data to update its predictive model. You have to feed the reality engine better data.
But there's a vital caveat here, and it requires a lot of patience.
Okay, what's the catch?
The research explored the timeline of neuroplasticity, and the hard truth is that it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Right, you can't just jog for 20 minutes, meditate for 5, and expect your lifelong phobia to vanish.
No, unfortunately not.
How long does the hardware actually take to upgrade?
The data confirms that it takes roughly 6 weeks of consistent daily practice for real structural neuroplasticity to occur and stabilize.
6 weeks?
Yeah. Habituation takes time. You're trying to dismantle a paved superhighway and build a new road through dense jungle. That requires sustained, repetitive effort.
So what does this all mean?
It means that while the architecture of our perception is bizarre and highly susceptible to illusion, we are not passive victims of it.
We started today looking at the deep, hidden architecture of the visual cortex, discovering that the part of our brain that sees the world is inherently mapped with the physical touch of our own bodies.
Right.
We never truly perceive anything completely disconnected from our physical selves.
No, we don't.
We saw how that intricate connection between sight, sound, and touch can be completely hijacked by virtual reality. We saw a brain eagerly prepare the muscles of the arm to lift the impossible weight of solid stone.
And we saw brains stretch the boundary of self to encompass digital wings.
We learned that while this embodiment is a powerful tool, it demands real-time feedback to truly alter our brainwaves, and that our individual neurology acts as a unique gatekeeper to how much of reality we're willing to rewrite.
And finally, we brought it all back to the ground level, to the everyday science of neuroplasticity.
Right.
The profound realization is that the exact same biological mechanisms that trick a VR user into embodying a stone avatar are the mechanisms we can harness to heal ourselves.
Through the BDNF boosting power of exercise, the synaptic pruning of meditation, and the real-time data input of reality testing, we can actively rewire our deepest anxieties.
We can guide our own hardware upgrades.
It is a phenomenal, empowering journey through the mechanics of the self. Your brain is the ultimate reality engine, constantly generating a story about what is happening and who you are. But you hold the pen.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
But before we sign off, we want to leave you with a lingering, somewhat provocative thought to mull over on your own.
Let's hear it.
If our brains can be so easily persuaded by a few sensory tricks that our arm has transmuted into solid stone, or that we were born with wings to fly, and if we can structurally dismantle and rewrite our deepest, most visceral personality traits and anxieties through sheer repetition, is there actually a true fixed version of who you are? Is there a core self sitting in the center of all this? Or are you simply a constantly shifting story, a fluid, ever-changing projection that a lump of tissue in a dark room is continuously telling itself to survive?
Heliox is produced by Michelle Brucker and Scott Bleakley. It features reviews of emerging research and ideas from leading thinkers, curated under their creative direction with AI assistance for voice, imagery, and composition. Systemic voices and illustrative images of people are representative tools, not depictions of specific individuals. Thanks for listening today. 4 recurring narratives underlie every episode: boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity, embodied knowledge, and quantum-like uncertainty. These aren't just philosophical musings, but frameworks for understanding our modern world. We hope you continue exploring our other episodes, responding to the content, and checking out our related articles at helioxpodcast.substack.com.